We are diving into the topic of belonging, what it is, what it isn't, mistakes leaders make. And to do this, I'm joined by Level 52 coach and facilitator, Jessica Heafey. Jessica, thank you for joining me.
Pleasure, Jason. Thank you.
So, belonging.
Hmm.
When I reached out to our incredible group of coaches and facilitators, I said, "Hey, I'd love to have you on the podcast. Here are some potential topics." You immediately jumped on belonging. What had you choose belonging?
It's funny. I looked at the list of options you proposed, and I even tried not to. I thought
Mhm.
that's so obvious. What else could I talk about? And I thought, no, I just have to do this. I mean, I've been working for years with leaders and organizations to help develop the awareness around the importance of belonging and where they're at in their leadership with it and within the organization and the impact that it has when it's there and when it's not. Um, and when I think of people, I mean, when belonging is absent, it leads to people not showing up for work or quiet quitting or,
Absenteeism.
all the things, either literally or figuratively or attrition, what have you. What leader wants to know that your team doesn't want to show up for work? They're dreading. They're going to go, but I mean, they'd rather they'd rather not. They'd rather be doing almost anything else. We're talking about the extreme, but it leads to that over time when a sense of belonging is not somewhere on your radar as a leader.
We're going to dive into many of the things that you've just said. What I'd love to know is what's some personal scar tissue for
Mm,
you around belonging?
yeah, and I have some. I've been in that place where I'm working with a team and the leader is often kind, often, I should say, often nice. There's a difference. But when there's an invitation for sharing your opinion or collaborating, it's actually met with resistance or dismissal, being ignored or explained why that's not a good idea. When I've been invited to offer feedback, and the team offers feedback, and now we're going to hear why that's not a good idea. And slowly we start to I remember I started to dim and offer less. All my enthusiasm that shows up with positive energy and willingness to support and to discover and to propose new ideas to make things better starts to dim. And I start to just more and more stay in my lane that is being communicated to me. And over time, that experience wore away at my sense of self worth, my confidence, and that bleeds in everything. I mean, we spend, you know, 40 hours a week doing work. If you're spending 40 hours a week of your life feeling like you're not valued and you need to be offering less and just stay in your lane and your
You don't
ideas
feel
are
like
not
you belong.
important, yeah, you don't feel like you belong.
What if you go back at 10, 15, 20 years ago, what
Mm.
did you used to believe about belonging that you now think was wrong or incomplete?
I used to think that because I was hired, I belonged. That just the act of being hired and arriving and being in this team, in this organization was enough.
And what do you think now?
Well, now that's definitely not enough. We're not just cogs, in this machine there to perform tasks, 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 tasks. We're human beings. We can't help it. We're human beings. And so it's important to feel like, oh my goodness, like what I did here made a difference to the team. It made a difference to our results, and they know it and they're recognizing it. And, that silly idea I had that I dared to share was received, and maybe it was used exactly as I proposed it, or maybe somebody built off of it, but some of me is contributing, is a part of this. And it makes such a difference. I mean, I'm noticing as I'm talking to you that I'm lighting up and sort of taking up more space, talking about the good side of belonging. And yeah, it makes such a difference.
In the way that people show up at their best in their work.
Absolutely.
Well, let's get a better understanding of your career path and how
Mm.
this has helped you experience belonging in a different way.
Sure. So I went to theater school. And so my first career, which continues actually, is as a professional actor in theater, voice, film, TV. And I could do a shameless plug right now, but we'll keep it for the end maybe. And I think that that's really important for my growth as a leadership coach and a facilitator, because all these soft skills that are truly essential skills that we are demanding in the workplace now, that of creativity, of empathy, of listening, that was a massively important foundation. And I also started out as an out of work actor. And so that's when the door opened for me being a coach, because I got hired. I was in Toronto. I got hired as a trained as a coach and facilitator to support leaders in being better communicators, in developing their relationship with their teams, with their stakeholders, with their clients, and then just grew from there. I started producing and directing, and the different ways in which you need to communicate for instance, as a director, when you're having to deal with the client, the ad agency, the studio, the actor, and they all kind of speak a different language. And I would need to figure out, what do they need so that they can feel like they belong, they're in the right place. I'm hearing what they're saying. I'm bringing it in so that people feel satisfied and not frustrated or left out. So that grew from there. Getting my official training and piece of paper, that important thing of becoming an executive leadership coach, and becoming a member through the ICF, and working with great organizations like Level 52 to help leaders level up.
Now, when you say professional acting, my idea, or at least the story inside of my head, is that's a very ruthless career path where you're auditioning, you're trying to prove yourself every time you show up to audition, and it almost seems counter to belonging.
Absolutely. And so one of the important things that I can say that I've experienced in terms of belonging and then not experienced is, you walk into that audition room and, I've prepared myself, for the role visually, hair, makeup, and so on. I've taken the time to not just learn the lines, but develop who this person is. I am prepared. And I walk in and I encounter a casting director, and they might welcome me and say, "Hey, nice to see you again." And, give me a chance to do my scene, and then say, "That was really interesting. How about we try this?" And they're in the room with me. They're receiving what I'm doing. Or I walk into the room with the casting director and they're behind the table and they barely look up and they're like, "Hey, yep, okay, thanks, bye." And I think, well, I don't even know what I feel here. I think I feel confused. I don't know if they even watched what I just did. Why did I put all that time and effort into it? So those are two vastly different experiences of one where I feel like I belong, whether I get it or not, because I was received and I impacted the other person and I had a connection with them for the time that I was in the room. And one where I just felt like going through a rotating door of bodies that I don't feel like I matter.
So you can be rejected and
Mhm.
still feel like you belong by the way that somebody connects and
Absolutely.
receives you.
Absolutely. I don't need everybody to take everything I say and run with it. If I'm proposing an idea, there might be a great reason why that's a terrible idea. And acknowledging my terrible idea might lead to, but you know what? Now that you've said that, and I've still been a contributor to that next new idea that was an offshoot from shooting mine down respectfully. Yeah.
Well, so we've started with this word belonging, and I'd love to lock in a definition.
Mm.
What's the simplest definition of what belonging is?
Belonging is the experience of feeling valued and heard and accepted.
The experience of being valued, heard, and accepted.
Of feeling valued, heard, and accepted.
Oh, what do you, in your experience, what do most people confuse belonging with? Mistake it for?
Well, one of the things that I've already mentioned is just, in the workplace context, I've hired you so you belong. I'm nice to you so you should feel like you belong. I've got to be all touchy feely all the time and only consider your feelings. And if you're not feeling it, then I should give you space and you can maybe not do your work. That the extreme version of it, when are we going to ever work?
Yeah, it a lot of teams say they want belonging, but maybe what they actually want is low friction. No hard conversations, no cultural disruption. Is that belonging or more emotional convenience?
That is a resilience killer.
Yeah. Yeah.
You need a degree of conflict. And I mean, we really need to widen the definition of conflict in the workplace. Conflict can be we simply we don't see the same path forward, or I want to do it this way, you want to do it that way. I think fast, you think slow. We just have a picture of how it can be done. So let's talk. I want to understand why you feel like we should do it your way, and let me explain to you, and like we'll just come to understand. And at one point we need to pick a path in our disagreement, in our conflict. But a conflict does not need to be explosive and angry and, very abrasive. And I know you did not say conflict, Jason. You said discomfort. But I think that conflict speaks, like the discomfort speaks directly to conflict in many ways in the workplace. So we avoid disagreeing with someone because it's uncomfortable, because it seems like we're going to have a conflict, an argument, rather than a great discussion. And you're worth delving into this discussion where we see it differently, Jason. And you're worth it. That it's now important that I hear you out. Like your intellect, your experience, your perspective is worthy of us delving into it right now.
So what do you do if I'm a leader and I truly want a culture of belonging, and if feel like you've had a good platform for your voice to be heard and other voices have contributed, but you still keep coming back? Can we still have a culture of belonging and at some point shut you down, end the discussion, even if it's not graceful?
Oh, well, see, when you added, even if it's not graceful, I mean, as a leader who is cultivating a culture of belonging, if one person's voice is being heard over everybody else's, that doesn't work for your team. That's going to work for one person, and they're not learning how to participate in making sure everybody belongs. And so when you added, if it's not done gracefully, I mean, there are instances where maybe you do need to shut somebody down quickly and then have a conversation with them. And then ideally, in the ideal world, you say, hey, take them aside and say, hey, great ideas, but you're taking a little bit too much airtime and I'm not getting a chance to hear everybody. And I do need to hear everybody. And that can hurt and that can feel uncomfortable to be the person, be the speaker speaking those things. And it can be uncomfortable and upsetting to hear it. And maybe you need to hear it. We're not, and that's the difference between kind and nice. When you've got somebody who is taking up too much time and you're letting them, people are going to start to be annoyed and resentful at them. You're not helping them in the workplace. They're not going to be building their own belonging in their own place. People are going to start to avoid, roll their eyes. Oh, there so and so goes again, taking up all the air out of the room.
You mentioned for the second time the difference between kind and nice. What's the difference to you?
Well, nice is, I don't know, I kind of want to say it's like oatmeal. It's really bland. I'm nice. Hi, how's it going? Hey, nice to see you. There's a superficiality to it, whereas a kindness is, Jason, if you're talking too much in a meeting consistently and people are tiring of you, and I know the team is tiring of hearing your voice, it's going to be hard for me to tell you, hey, Jason, your ideas are great. I need you to be more concise and be aware of other people who want to speak as well. It's hard, it's uncomfortable, but it's kind because helps you to build your awareness around the impact you're having around people and the opinion, like how you're making people feel.
Yeah, nice is soft, and dare I say, nice can be avoidance versus kind can be clear and hit it straight. But it's got much more graceful approach than if you,
I think kindness is intentionality,
yeah, good distinction.
nice glazes.
Yeah. What happens in leadership teams when belonging is missing?
Different forms of attrition, you know, quiet quitting or actual turnover. Those are the obvious ones that are easy to detect and document. When people ask no questions, when they don't offer ideas, when it's too quiet, really, that is a really great measure of not belonging. I think of a situation where I was in a meeting with my team, and the leader was announcing a new client and a method we were going to approach, and this is one in a place where we didn't feel like we belonged. And big announcement. And okay, what questions do you have? Silence. Our questions probably aren't going to be answered. We're not going to get the information that we're looking for. We're not going to feel reassured at the end. If we have any ideas based on what was shared, they're not going to be entertained. So we're just going to stay in our lane and we'll be quiet and we'll just receive and do what we're told and how we're told to do it. And I think those are big indicators.
So a space where your ideas, your creativity, your contributions don't belong because they won't be received. What does belonging have to do with loneliness? Or does it even relate?
I mean, it absolutely can. Over time, when we feel like we don't belong and we start to offer less of ourselves, it's isolating because there's less interaction, less sharing of ideas, less reaching out, less you don't ask for help, you don't offer help, you don't share ideas, and so you just keep to yourself. And it's so that can certainly you can be surrounded by people and feel isolated and lonely.
Yeah, because I remember reading a 2025 loneliness study, the Cigna study, and it stated that 61% of Americans report loneliness, which is a affects cost in absenteeism, affects cost in stress leave, which is a $154 billion economic problem when you look through that lens. And so it had me wonder what relationship there is between issues of belonging and this epidemic of loneliness.
Oh, that's a big one. And I feel like I can't separate it from phones and how much we interact, how much we interact with our our phones and how little we interact with people because of it.
Well, even Jessica, even outside of our phones, if you look at many organizations, when you're being bombarded by Teams chats or Slack, that there isn't that face to face or relational component because I'm just trying to keep pace with all of the messages that are flooding me.
Yeah, there's such an overwhelm and like which path do you choose? What are you going to answer? Which way are you going to move? And then you sit there with this tornado of messaging and to-dos and so on, eventually have to either make a choice or, I don't know, go numb. But yeah, it's really, and it also speaks to, there's loneliness, there's also engagement and the lack of engagement. Those feed into one another as well. You're talking about statistics. I think that it was Gallup that did a research that said 20% of the worldwide workforce is said to be engaged, and that's costing something like 10 or 20 trillion dollars. Well, when you are not engaged with another human being and you're just doing the work, loneliness, disengagement, not belonging, and there's an incredibly strong case, a business case, never mind the human side of feeling connected with others, but that the business case of investing time and energy and connecting with people and with your team to impact your bottom line.
I was at a presentation a while ago where a global Deloitte expert was speaking about psychological safety and performance. And I started thinking as it relates to this discussion, and here's where I landed, and I want to push on it with you. I wonder if, well, in fact, I don't even wonder. My current belief, I don't think a leader's job is to create belonging. I think a leader's job is to clarify the standard that's worth belonging to, make the standard explicit, public, and then let people choose whether they want to earn it.
I think there's a lot of truth in that, in the sense that, I mean, the result of all the way the culture that you set up and the ways of being in the workplace that the expectations that you set will ultimately, ideally, lead to belonging. But yes, the initial I'm going to do this so that you feel like you belong. I'm going to do this so that you feel like you belong. That feels unrealistic, especially when you're dealing with a huge organization and hundreds, if not thousands, of people. You can't realistically connect with each and every one of them. But to choose to set a standard where people are not just going to be treating you with respect, but like, let's get curious. Who are you? What do you excel at? What aren't you great at? What do you want to get better at? What are you struggling with right now? What do you need? And if that's the standard that you set and people begin to connect and to know how to challenge each other and to support each other, ultimately that's going to lead to a culture of belonging. So the standard that a leader sets, yeah, absolutely.
One of the stories that was shared, the Navy SEAL perspective, and I know that's an extreme performance environment, but it gives us a fascinating lens to look through where there's the concept of you earn your trident every day and that belonging is earned and it's renewed daily. And so that brings an interesting question. So then in an environment of belonging, do you still have to prove you belong every day?
I don't know about every day, but there's a certain consistency that is needed in the human interactions, in the clarity with which we express ourselves, in the way that we hear each other, that we listen, in the way that we receive, in the safety that we create so that we can take risks, so we can make mistakes and learn from them. And so daily, I mean, I think every leader needs to do it daily. Do they need to do it with every single person? You can be witnessing the steps that lead to that and not necessarily always receiving them, but that builds consistency within the organization.
Well, it goes back to that word intention, right? If we've got people on our team that have the intention, if we go to the Navy SEAL example where their intention is, how am I going to prove that I have the right to this trident every day? That as a mechanism for engagement, people signing up to belong to the mission, to the cause versus being a transactional cog on the wheel. Like, is that subtle shift the how will I serve the purpose today, the mission of the organization, that as the catalyst for belonging?
That is a catalyst for belonging, and it goes both ways. And because we've been really focusing on the leader, but everybody needs to engage with that intention, of course, as well, in order for it to work. And you've got some early bloomers and some late bloomers on that one.
You've got some early bloomers and late bloomers, but you still need the sun, the seed, and the soil to work together to make that blooming happen. Where
Absolutely.
I don't know if your experience is the same, but I think leaders have this immense pressure. How do I create belonging as if it's all on my shoulders? But you have to demonstrate the desire to want to belong. Otherwise, it won't work.
You mean you, the individual who's part of the team, not the leader?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And see, now we're talking chicken and egg, right? I mean, if you land in an organization and there is also already you arrive and, oh gosh, this is a toxic culture. Like, you've just landed, and how am I gonna how am I gonna move forward intentionally, showing that I want to belong because I'm afraid already. Or you land in an organization where it feels welcoming and warm and dynamic and healthy and engaging. And there's truly a welcome, open door to innovation and risk taking. And then it's easy to be intentional about being present. So chicken or egg, that's a
Yeah. Well, it's what I'm getting at is at its best, the conditions are ripe when both
Mhm.
converge. But let me give you an example. This was a discussion I had yesterday with a 78-year-old, 79-year-old, very successful individual in the construction industry, had their own construction company, but spent almost 30 years at a very large company. He said he would do whatever it took to be his best, to the point where people in the business would say, stop working so hard. You're making us look bad. But yet he went above and beyond. And he said he was one of the very few people that wasn't laid off when the down season came because he was demonstrating value. To me, that is a great example of someone who is showing that they belong, therefore they belong. And in our work, there's the object or agent. The
Mhm.
agent says, how do I demonstrate belonging to the organization versus an object says, I hope they make me feel like I belong. And isn't that part of the issue?
Absolutely valid, absolutely important as well. I think ideally we show up as our best every time, every day. And in your example, this gentleman was ultimately recognized for his contribution when he was one of the few that was kept. So they saw, they knew, they understood, and they appreciated and valued him. And if the messages that he consistently got in his endeavor to be intentionally engaged and to belong was always who did this, who are you, what did you do, I don't think that anyone can keep that up for 30 years.
Nor should they
So
want to.
exactly, exactly.
Wouldn't they
Why
think,
why
well,
am I
I'm going to go,
here?
yeah, I'm going to go belong somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely, both, it needs to come in both, in all directions.
Yeah. In preparation for this podcast, in my research, I found something by journalist Sebastian Junger. He wrote the book titled Tribe on homecoming and belonging. And he found that war veterans miss war. They don't miss the violence, but they miss the depth of belonging that adversity produced. And it made me wonder, have we engineered too much comfort in modern teams to really produce the depth of belonging?
Too much comfort in the teams. I don't know that organizations are engineering comfort. I think that there's a lack of resilience and understanding in the importance of disagreeing and having different perspectives. And I think that discomfort is undervalued. Comfort is individually and sometimes as a team, this is so complex because I think of, big companies like Google who, have a lounge area and they've got a kitchen and they've got a pool table and they've got a massage therapist, and that's a lot of comfort. But when you are also seeking comfort and only agreement in a discussion where you need to come to a decision and you need to come to some understanding, inevitably you should be met with some resistance, with some opposition, so that you can flesh out all the possibilities and come up with the best possible solution. And so I don't know about engineering comfort. I think that it brings me back to being a parent, where parents don't want their kids to get upset at school about this and get bad grades because it's upsetting, and what's that going to do to their confidence. And suddenly we have a generation of kids who have not had the opportunity to build resilience. When it's hard, you still work through it. Yeah, so I think that's a whole podcast right there, Jason.
Well, here's what I'm hearing, and you tell me if I've heard this correctly. You can't have a real culture of belonging if you aren't able to stand in real discomfort together. Where have you seen teams get it wrong?
When they don't speak up, when you're in the middle of a meeting and you see the timeline's not going to work, or there's gaps in your plan, and here's where I know you're going to fail here and here, and we're going to all be in chaos. And now, because we don't feel like we belong, because we don't feel like we can speak, because we're afraid to, we can't take the risk of having somebody disagree with us or getting it wrong. I'm just going to go along with the plan, pretty darn sure it's not going to work, and willingly go with something that I believe will fail. What an opportunity missed to, forecast better.
Well, if a leader's listening to this, how do they know if people are just going along with it?
Quiet when there should be questions and ideas. To me, that's the loudest indicator.
There should be questions, there should be ideas, and there should be some form of conflict. If you don't have conflict, you don't have belonging.
Yeah, if I disagree with something and I can't even be bothered to engage with you, to tell you that you might be going, like, I don't think enough of you to save you here, to have your back.
Let's jump to a would you rather scenario. My perspective is leadership is just a big game of trade-offs. It's a constant game of would you rather. And I've got a would you rather question here. Your job is to pick a side and then expand upon it. There's no sitting in the middle. Here's the statement. Would you rather lead a team that loves you but isn't exactly sure what the standard is, or a team that knows exactly where the standard is but isn't sure that they love you as their leader?
I would rather the second, where they are clear of the standard, because I don't know how long your team can like you if they're not clear on what the standard is. Eventually you're making life harder for them anyway. And as someone who can set the clear standard and set the expectations, you can still work on the connection and being respected. You don't have to have everybody like you.
Why is it so hard for leaders?
Who doesn't want to be liked? I mean, there are precious few who want to be feared, who like to be intimidating and so on. But generally, as human beings, we want to be liked, and that's what makes tough decisions tough. Somebody's going to suffer.
Where does being liked fit in this concept of belonging?
I mean, that's a nice to have, but it's not a necessity.
I can belong and not be liked?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I've seen a lot of teams where there are really valuable members who are contributing a lot, and they're not the most liked, but boy, when their skill set, when their expertise is needed, boy, are we grateful to have them.
We just avoid them unless it's a necessity.
We're not going to go have a beer. We can still recognize their contributions. We can still be grateful when they save us at these moments where we especially need them. We can recognize them and not be best buds.
Okay, let's jump to some true and false. Your job is to say true or false. Again, no sitting on the fence. And I've grabbed a few of these to generate discussion and debate around this topic. So some of it might overlap with what we've discussed, but possibly a different entry point. Okay, true or false? Most people who say they want belonging actually just want recognition, and leaders are solving the wrong problem.
False. You ask tough questions. False, because it's more than being recognized. When you're seen, when you're acknowledged in a place, it's empowering. You can grow so much from that. And so to simply think, oh, I'm just going to recognize, good job, good job. Anybody can recognize, great job, team. We did it. We achieved our mission here on this one. But to have somebody understand and acknowledge what you did goes so much more deeply than the superficiality of simply recognizing someone. You can have empty recognition every single day, absolutely meaningless recognition. And so that's an easy way to get it wrong.
I was talking to someone that works in healthcare, and they worked there for 15 years, front lines. And they said that on the day of their 15th anniversary, there was an email that popped up, a digital rabbit that said, "Congratulations, we appreciate the work that you do." And they were like, not my supervisor. Nobody gave me a call and said, "Wow, in an industry where there's a 7-year span on the type of work that you do, you lasted 15." So that's what comes to mind when it's an empty acknowledgement.
Yeah, you couldn't even bother. Like, you don't even think enough of me to come find me, look me in the eye, and recognize what an accomplishment it is that I stayed, that I have given, that I have made everyone's life better. Like, what a literal lives. I just, I love when people bother. There's something about, and it doesn't, these can be micro interactions. We don't need a 2-hour party to recognize this person who's been there for 15 years. But to be intentional about seeking them out and thanking them in a meaningful way can transform their day and their sense of belonging. I think that we overestimate, many leaders overestimate what it means, what the exercise of belonging is, and the amount of time and energy that it can take. Not every moment with each individual when you're looking to connect, to acknowledge, to get to know them needs to be this 2-hour meeting of let's get into it. And, we can have micro interactions that are intentional and meaningful. And that's how you stay consistent. And that's how belonging happens, the consistency of it.
And if you can't be bothered, then you probably don't belong in a leadership position. Because I think then at its worst, or maybe this is just the reality, belonging has so many different lenses because this person, what's the question that goes inside their mind? Do I really want to belong here? Because isn't that when we strip away, when you've got belonging right, that means I long to be here, to do this beautiful work, to serve this mission, to create this value. And that longing is what has people show up at their best.
Absolutely. And, I think of this example of this nurse who shows up and gives of herself every day and knows, because you can't do that for 15 years and not know that you're making a change. And you're making it thanks to the team that surrounds you. And then your leader does
Can't be
not.
bothered.
Yeah.
Okay. True or false? Cults are better at belonging than most workplaces, and leaders should really study what they're doing right before dismissing.
False.
Say more.
Absolutely false. Well, I think, cults start to twist your identity. I think that a leader and an organization needs to build off of this person's identity, i.e., what are your strengths? Your strengths. What makes you great? Like what are the ways in which you're making a change, making a difference in our team today, and build off of what is instead of warp it and twist a human being to fit this unfortunate ideology. Belonging is incredibly important, and a huge piece of that is diversity. And if we want everybody to have the same thought, the same opinion, the same way of being, sure, go to the cult. You can all go be the same. But over here, we want the best of everybody. We want to support the challenges. We want innovation. Take a risk, ask for help, make a mistake. So yeah, leave the cults outside of this one.
Yeah. So let's drill into this because there's something fascinating where at in some respects there's a mechanism of belonging that comes with, you said belonging at its best is diversity. Some might argue that belonging is best achieved through exclusivity.
And that's an unfortunate perspective.
Let's look at like country club as an example. There is a dress code. There are criteria that you have to meet to get into a certain club that fosters a sense of belonging. Now, whether that's the right type of belonging, we can unpack that, but it does foster a sense of belong here because I've met the criteria and not everybody has access to this.
Well, now we're talking about black and white.
Mm,
You
mm.
can buy yourself into this country, this club. You can buy your way in. Everywhere you go, there are a set of rules around what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. There is no place where you will land in your own home, in your workplace, where you can be absolutely reckless, and there are no set of rules of how to be to a degree, right? You're hired for this job. We expect that you're going to show up and do a certain number of hours within a certain time frame that meets the requirements of your job, and do the work. How you're going to do it, this is where you as an individual in all your uniqueness get to show up. And you need to follow a certain protocol to a degree, but I always encourage leaders to seek out and welcome the risk or the question, why are we doing it this way? And if the answer is because we always have, then let's look at that, because always is a long time and it doesn't indicate a lot of reflection of how can it be even better. And so some rules, I mean, I think of your country club, there is a certain criteria, a certain set of behavior, and then not everybody's going to be a robot behaving the same way. Otherwise, it's going to be highly uninteresting place to be.
It's fascinating. While I'm not advocating for cults, obviously, there's structures that tend to produce deep belonging, clear mission, a high cost of admission, whatever that means, a named out group, a shared rituals, public commitments, earned advancement, shared adversity, as we talked about earlier. These are some of the structures that something like a cult would use. The difference between a cult and a championship team isn't the structure, it's whether the structure is paired with that manipulation.
That's it. So you've just named a whole bunch of processes used by a cult that are used in families, in workplaces, in public gatherings. But how are we doing it?
Why are we doing it? How are we doing it? Do we have these structures, and are they paired with the integrity of our mission and vision?
Absolutely.
If I'm a leader and I'm considering what belonging looks like on my team, what's the worst advice a leader could get around this concept of belonging?
Some of the worst advice is, make sure everybody's nice to everybody and they go out for beers every once in a while so that they can connect, because that lacks context. What is important about connection? What does that look like? And what impact will it have on your relationship with this individual, on your relationship with the team? It's understanding who we each are and what we contribute and how we can contribute that makes the difference. How are we going to use what we learn when we're listening to someone, when we're getting to know them and their aspirations in life, in the organization? Are we just hearing and then shutting the door as though we never had that conversation? Or do we remember them and go, hey, you talked to me about wanting to be a little bit more involved in the process, and we're about to re-examine how we onboard a new client. Do you want to join in? I remembered we talked about that. Like, just very, very simple things. But when we are so very productivity focused, we stop noticing how fast we're going and how much we're leaving behind, how much we're excluding.
Yeah. I don't know how many times I've said to senior leadership teams that the raging torrent of pace will always erode the good things first.
Hmm.
When does belonging become dangerous?
Dangerous.
Risky, ineffective?
When it's prioritized above all else at the exclusion of the work, because I think it's part of the work. Belonging is not, we're going to do the work and now we're going to take a break, stop doing our work and connect so that you can feel heard and you can feel valued. And the belonging is integrated into the work. So it's dangerous when you think that it's an isolated process, because it's going to bring a lack of productivity, not great results, people who are unsatisfied, a real lack of direction and leadership, a lack of integration of the intention of creating a culture of belonging with the work.
What's more important than belonging? If I'm prioritizing as a leader, belonging's a part of it, but what should I make more important than belonging?
I don't think you get to pick one thing as a leader. As a leader, there are many things that are important in your job, and your hard job is to find the balance, and it's not static. That's why you are the leader. That's why you get paid more. That's why you have the structure and the support from the team that you do, because you have to figure out how to balance all of your priorities. And there are times where you might prioritize belonging because you realize, oh, shoot, I got too focused on this other aspect of work. And now I just need to take a little bit more time and focus on that. But you don't get to pick one.
Okay, so let's take this prioritizing belonging. We talked about some visible indicators. People aren't speaking. And maybe an obvious one is attrition. But what's an unobvious but important sign that I need to prioritize belonging here.
When certain teams or departments somehow implode suddenly, those things don't happen suddenly overnight. There were things that were brewing for some time that you weren't paying attention to, weren't aware of. And so that's an aspect when you've been focused on the tasks and not enough on the people.
So if I diagnose that I need to prioritize belonging, what's the smallest practice or the first action that can get me moving in the right direction?
Vulnerability.
Say more.
So if I think of your example, the example that I gave in terms of this team imploding, there are lots of things in that moment that needs to be done. But one of them is everyone. I did not know what the status, what was going on in the team, and that's on me. And I'm sorry that I was not more connected with what was going on, what your needs were. I wasn't able to meet your needs and to give you the support you needed. You take that responsibility and you say, I want to do better. What is the next best step? And you figure that out together.
That's engaging them in the process so they can feel heard, valued, some of the things that you said at the beginning.
You can get creative together. And it's a risk to offer that vulnerability, and it's an important one.
What haven't we unpacked around belonging that is important?
Well, I think touching on risks and mistakes and how you handle them. Your own, for example. And I gave the example of here, own up to this mistake that you've made of being so absent that you didn't even know what was going on here. How much you vocalize yourself, your own fears and your own mistakes will empower your team to be able to come to you when there is a mistake that is made, or when there's an underperformance or something that was missed. And I'm actually thinking, I was at my kids' baseball tournament this weekend, and there was one kid on the team who was absolutely incredible. At every moment, whether they were on the field or up at bat, this kid was riling up the team and getting everybody pumped up and recognizing who was at bat and setting up cheers for each individual. And when people were missing a catch, dropping the ball, making some mistakes, little flubs, hey, don't worry, we got your back, you're good. And acknowledging the mistake and saying you are still part of the team. And there is no way after that anybody could not look at that kid in the eye for how bad they felt for their flub after that. They were still part of the team. And when you're a leader who can consistently do that yourself and for others, you don't allow anybody to underestimate or to shame or to exclude people who make a mistake. And that's going to create a lot more of a feeling of belonging and the feeling of support within the team and empowering to take risks and be creative and be innovative and come to you when they need help, because they're not going to be shamed or fired or dismissed. They're not in trouble. They are celebrated, seen, supported, valued.
So if a leader remembers only one thing, based on the things that we've unpacked in this discussion, what is it?
Get used to being uncomfortable. Practice being uncomfortable.
There are a few questions I wrote down, and feel free to add to this list, because I'm wondering what's the entry point? There are questions like, what do I want to belong to is important. Do I know what it takes to belong here? Do I want to belong to something like this? Like, those are very important questions that I don't think many people ask. Then as a leader, are they clear on what it takes to belong? Do they belong? What would it take for them to belong here? Like, I think these are simple but significant questions that if we're not willing to answer, how can we possibly create the conditions for belonging to occur? Otherwise, aren't we just making assumptions?
Yeah, we're making a lot of assumptions that people are in our heads and want the same things that we want, and we haven't even fleshed out what we want ourselves. Your question made me think of, there are a lot of people who are changing their jobs, their careers drastically into an area of the work that they would have never gone into. And maybe the industry that they've just joined is not one that would have necessarily appealed to them, but the culture of the work and what they get to do and the way in which they're fully, wholly utilized is engaging and empowering to them. And that's a really important thing to notice and to delve into when you have people who come from a whole other world into your workplace makes them want to be there because that they're kind of in a way a fish out of water, and but there's something about what you've created that makes them want to be there, that makes them want to stay. And so where do you start from belonging is, I mean, reflection. What makes you want to stay? It's not just power and paycheck, hopefully, because that's going to make you a very thin leader. But when you start to ask those questions that we don't take time enough to reflect upon and have the conversation with your executive team. What what's great about being here? What's not so great about being here? What can we change? How can we improve? What can we lean into?
What will make people want to be here and what will make people want to long for the vision and the
Mm,
mission that we're here to serve?
yeah.
It, Jessica, I've got a random question I like to ask every guest, and that is, what invisible force do you think most determines whether a leader succeeds or fails?
Knowing that you're not alone. I think that a lot of leaders, and it's very isolating when you're a senior leader, it can be very isolating. But it's also false to think that you're alone and you got there alone and you will stay there alone. And that's the force of when you recognize that you have a team that helped you get there, consciously or not, and that will help you stay there and will help you succeed because everybody's mission is to honor the mission and the vision of the organization because it speaks to them as well. And they are nourished by it and by the interactions. Knowing you're not doing it alone can make or break a leader.
So, if you're a listener, your job is to take something that you heard in this podcast and put it to the test, experiment. That's what being in this never ending laboratory is. Jessica, thank you for coming in, sharing your expertise and your wisdom around belonging. And I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jason.